Hey, so it is Thursday, April 16th, 2020, and we are getting ready to talk about how Rome was governed. So, in the last year, we have talked about all kinds of different governments and leaders. We've had pharaohs, there have been kings, there have been tyrants, the tyrannists. There has been a little bit of democracy when we got into Greece. We study legalism. Rome is going to be a little more familiar to you. Today, you're going to be able to identify the characteristics of the Roman Republic and describe how it changed. We're going to read History Live, chapter 33 together, and then there is a 10-question multiple choice assignment on Schoology for you. So before we get started, here is our what do I notice, what do I wonder for today. If we know that we're talking about the Roman government or the Roman Republic, what do you notice about this type of government or this photo or illustration? It's not a photo, this illustration of the Roman Republic. And then what do you wonder? I know what I noticed right away. Comment on this video and tell me what you notice and what you wonder. As we read, let's see if any of our noticing or what we're wondering pops up in our reading today. So you should have opened up the attachment on Schoology, chapter 33, The Rise of the Roman Republic. We're going to start here with the introduction. Remember, I am on video, so after you hear something, pause it, go and see if you can answer that in your Schoology assignment right away so you don't have to try and remember everything. What were the characteristics of the Roman Republic and how did they change over time? Introduction. Etruscan kings from northern Italy ruled early Rome around 509 BCE. The Romans overthrew the Etruscans and created a republic, a form of government in which leaders are elected to represent the people. Ancient Romans told an interesting story about the overthrow of their Etruscan rulers. One day, two Etruscan princes visited the famous oracle at Delphi. In Greece, a Roman named Lucius Junius Brutus traveled with them. At Delphi, the prince asked the oracle which one of them would be next king of Rome. The oracle answered, "The next man to have authority in Rome will be the man who first kisses his mother." Hearing this prediction, Brutus pretended to trip. He fell on his face and his lips touched earth, which is often considered the mother of all living things. Back in Rome, Brutus led the revolt that had eliminated the Etruscan kings. The oracle's mysterious words came true to some degree, because Brutus became one of the first leaders of the new republic. The Roman people were now free to govern themselves. Unfortunately, not all Romans were equal under this new system. Power in the early republic belonged to rich men called patricians. The majority of Romans, the plebeians, had no voice in the government. In this lesson, you'll see how a struggle between patricians and plebeians shaped the government of Rome. So we're talking about two main groups of people, the patricians, usually all the rich men, and the plebeians, ones who had no voice in the government, everybody else. Section 1, Patricians and Plebeians under Etruscan rule. Between 616 and 509 BCE, the Etruscans ruled Rome. During this time, Roman society was divided into two classes, patricians and plebeians. Upper-class citizens called patricians came from a small group of wealthy landowners. Patrician comes from the Latin word pater, which translates to father. The patricians chose from among themselves the fathers of the state. The men who advised the Etruscan king, patricians controlled the most valuable land and also held the important military and religious offices. Free, non-patricians called plebeians, who comprised about 95% of Rome's population, were mostly peasants, laborers, craftspeople, and shopkeepers. The word plebeian comes from plebes, which translates to the common people. Plebeians could not be priests or government officials and had little voice in the government, but they were still forced to serve in the army. Section 2. The patricians create a republic. Eventually, the patricians resented the Etruscan rule in 509 BCE. A group of patricians led by Lucius Junius Brutus rebelled and drove out the Etruscan king. Instead of monarchy, they developed a republic, in which elected officials govern for the people. To the patricians, the people meant themselves, not the plebeians. The patricians placed most of the power in the hands of the Senate, which was a group of 300 patricians elected by patricians. The senators served for life. They also appointed other government officials. Two elected leaders called consuls shared command of the army. The Senate was supposed to advise the consuls, and their decisions were considered law. The creation of the Republic gave Rome a more democratic form of government. However, only the patricians could participate in the government. So we can kind of infer what happens with the plebeians. Section 3, the plebeians rebel. Even though Rome was now a republic, the patricians retained all the power. They ensured that only they could participate in the government. Only they could become senators or consuls. Plebeians had to obey their decisions. Because laws were not written down, patricians often changed or interpreted the laws to benefit themselves. As a result, a small group of families maintained all the power in Rome. The plebeians had to unite and fight for what they wanted. They began to demand more political rights. The struggle between plebeians and patricians is referred to as the conflict of the orders, a conflict between the two social classes. The rivalry grew especially heated during times of war. The new republic frequently fought wars against neighboring tribes. Plebeians resented the fact that they were required to fight in the army even though the patricians decided whether to go to war. The struggle took a dramatic turn in the year 494 BCE, at which point Rome was a city of 20 to 40,000 people, and the majority of the population was plebeian. Angry over their lack of power, the plebeians marched out of the city and camped on a nearby hill, refusing to return until the patricians met their demands. Work in the city and on the farms came to a halt, putting Rome in a crisis. Without the plebeians, patricians feared the army would be helpless if enemy struck at Rome. A great panic seized the city, wrote Livy, a noted Roman historian. With Rome quickly deteriorating, the patricians had little choice but to compromise. The plebeians gained political equality. The plebeians revolt to a major change in Roman government. The patricians agreed to allow the plebeians to elect the officials called tribune of the plebs. The tribunes represented the plebeians in the Senate and with the consuls. Later, tribunes gained the power to veto or overrule actions by the Senate and other government officials. Eventually, the number of tribunes increased from 2 to 10. Plebeians could also elect a law-making body, the Council of Plebs. However, the council created laws only for plebeians, not for patricians. Although the plebeians had gained some important rights, they still had less power than the patricians. Over the next 200 years, the plebeians conducted a series of protests to gradually win political equality. First, they demanded that the laws be transcribed or written down so that the patricians couldn't change them at will. Around the year 451 BCE, the patricians agreed, and the laws were published on tablets called the 12 Tables. That's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. Next, in 367 BCE, a new law stated that one of the two consuls must be a plebeian. Former consuls held seats in the Senate, so this change allowed plebeians to become senators. Finally, in 287 BCE, the plebeians earned the right to pass laws for all Roman citizens. Now assemblies of all Roman citizens, such as the Citizens' Association, could approve or reject laws. These plebeian assemblies also nominated the consuls, the tribunes, and the members of the Senate. The number of plebeians who served alongside patricians in the Senate continued to increase. After 200 years of struggle, the plebeians had won their fight for equality. The diagram shown here illustrates the organization of the Roman Republic following this victory. Rome's republic form of government inspired future European and American leaders. Rome became an example of a type of government ruled by a set of basic laws or a constitution. Future political thinkers also drew from Roman ideas of elected assemblies, citizenship, and civic duty. They adopted the model of government bodies that could check each other's power. Most importantly, they were inspired by the spirit of republicanism, which means that government should rule for the good of the people. Cicero, a famous Roman statesman, captured the spirit when he wrote, "The people's good is the highest law." So let's take a look at the organization of the patricians and the plebeians. So after 200 years, eventually, the plebeians were able to protest their way into equality in their government, looking more like a government that we have here in the United States, electing officials from all over the country. Make sure you refer back to this video if you need to answer those questions 1 through 10 in your Schoology assignment. Do some research on your own too. YouTube plebeians and partitions and see what YouTube can tell you about the Roman government. If you have any questions, I'm always here. Just let me know. Thanks. Have a good day.